Alright, greetings everyone. Alex with another video here for the tuning series. In this video we're going to be covering the MAF tuning. And I think what you're going to find in all these videos is it's really straightforward. It's pretty dead simple. There's not going to be these videos here won't be so lengthy because mainly there's a lot of other good resources on YouTube that go into specifics of how to set the data tables up and making the changes and whatnot. So these are going to be pretty short, pretty straightforward. One of the big benefits with going the direction of using the LT4 Supercharger is we get to utilize the engineering resources that GM's already put into tuning the LT4 and using a lot of the values for the LT4 in other applications. Again, whether that's your LT1 or the LT3, like in my case, or LT6. So that's a real big benefit. Otherwise, it'd be a lot more work than what you're going to see going through the series. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into MAF. So, MAF is probably the most simplest one to do, and I really like it, just because it's dead simple. Now, you can see here where I really got pretty granular and broke things out with cold start versus warm start, your post starts or idling. And I did follow these for the most part, but honestly, you're going to catch these three all here in your part throttle. I kind of wanted to have these separate just in case there were some major issues I needed to work on in either one of these operations, and I could just have a dedicated area to have those changes. But really the two big ones are going to be your part throttle and your full throttle. And so what I did for the rest of the tuning process is I really just focused on part throttle and did that for the rest of these. And then once I got my part throttle kind of worked out, then I went back and would start doing things for wide open throttle. Really just, again, it's going back to just taking those baby steps and building more confidence with the vehicle and not pushing it too hard where you're going to run into issues or put yourself in danger when you're out there on the road. So in any case, let's jump into this. So for the MAF tuning, so this is with regards to the mass transformation curve. Where you're going to find that is in your engine and in airflow. And it's going to be this airflow versus frequency. There's also this airflow 2 versus frequency, and to be honest, I've never had to use that. I've always just used this first one. And again, there's also lots of good videos out there, whether it's Gen 4, Gen 3, Gen 5, that kind of talks about this. But it's really simple. We're just creating a data table that looks like this in our VCM scanner. So that's what I have set up over here. So what you're going to need for this is you're going to need to be logging your wideband. You're going to need to have your committed airfield ratio, and you're also going to need to have your mass airflow sensor and frequency, or in hertz, so the frequency. Those are the three main parameters you're going to need for doing the MAF tuning. So I'm not going to go in a lot of detail about how to set those up and all that, because again, there's other videos that cover that in more detail. So it just really was as simple as just taking it on the road. Now one thing that I did do, going back to the baby steps, and I don't know if that's reflected here in my logs. Okay, yeah, it kind of is. So this biggest thing, I guess, takeaway out of this is going back to the baby steps. So again, we're focused on part throttle here, so steady state cruising. So kind of the first couple logs was mainly just cruising around the neighborhood. So this is, depending on your neighborhood, but for me, that's about 25 miles an hour. So that's cruising around hilly conditions in the neighborhood, flat conditions, giving it some variable terrain, and you're working this through 0 miles an hour all the way up to 25, maybe 30 miles an hour. I would also would put this down in a manual and just manually step through some of the gears, up to maybe I think around third gear, just to really get those RPMs up. and to get into some other areas to collect data. So I would start off just at low speeds here in the neighborhood, and then for the highway, what I did here is this was, once the neighborhood would capture those logs, make my changes, and once I got that in a good point, a good state, and again, what's telling you that is back on your VCM scanner. Over here is going to be what your wideband's telling you and what you're actually commanded. And again, this is so now we're in tuning mode. So this is going and shutting off some adaptive fuel controls and all that. And I'll talk about those in a minute. But basically, what I would do then is I would go into, now I'm going to get into like towns. And it doesn't matter the location, it's just where the focus for me was is the speed. So now I'm taking it up to about 40 miles an hour. And again, trying to vary the terrain that I'm driving in. So, hilly conditions, flat conditions, it's the summertime, so it's going to be pretty hot and humid around here, sometimes up to 100% humidity. So it's just really getting exposed to all these different conditions to capture some good data to take back. And then, once I would had that dialed in for just around town driving, stopping and going and all that fun stuff. Then I would get into a little bit. Then I'd bump it up to the next speed, and so now I'm looking at kind of your back roads. So at this point, I'm driving between 50 and 60 miles an hour. And again, same thing. You want to expose this to various terrains. So again, hilly conditions, flat terrain, that type of stuff. And so I'd capture my logs with that, make my changes, and then finally, I'd when I get to the point where I feel comfortable with how the truck's behaving and where things are at, I would then take it out on the freeway. And so at this point, I'm doing anywhere between 65 and 75 miles an hour on the freeway, and two, another thing is going out for decent long drives. So anywhere between 10 to 25 miles. To just capture lots of data points for the different conditions that it's in. So this is probably the most, you could probably knock this out within a day, maybe 2 days, just depending on your schedule. But it's really dead simple. It's just logging the your data in here and then coming back to VCM Emitter and making your changes in the table and just making sure you don't have any big dips or spikes, having a nice smooth graph. So this one was really simple, got that done pretty quick, and worked out pretty well. See, outside of that, I don't think there was much else to talk about when it came to MAF. There really wasn't any big issues. Like I said, it was pretty easy. And that first one, when I was driving it was pretty rough. And my air fuel ratio error was quite high. And what I mean by that is I had this set up for I think it's 12. I had it set up for 12 parts fuel to 1 part air, and this guy would be down to 10, so it was burning pretty rich, and it didn't like it. So that's expected. That's part of the tuning. You're trying to clean that up and get that as close to the commanded as you can. That was how I methodology I used for getting that tuned in. So next, let's just talk a little bit about how to set this up. And I think I did cover this in another video, but we'll go through here again. And this carries on through pretty much a lot of the other tuning steps, whether that's speed density or whatnot. So the first thing, basically what you want to do is you want to disable all of your adaptive fuel controls. You don't want your long-term fuel trims and your O2 sensors and cutoffs to be in play and making changes behind you, and you're capturing bad data. The way I like to think about this is you're trying to get this vehicle to act like the pre-80s when OBD first came out. So what that means is going in there and disabling your long-term fuel trims, disabling your O2 sensors, so this thing's going to be running in open loop all the time. disabling your deceleration fuel cutoff, so that's when you're cruising down the road and you let your foot off the throttle and it shuts the throttle bleed, and it also turns off your injectors. You're not spraying fuel anymore. You really get putting this in the engine in a raw mode and trying to get this thing to run as efficiently as it can before allowing the computer to come back in and take over and fix that for you with its adaptive fuel controls. Now, the air fuel ratios itself. So this is something that you don't necessarily have to do the way I do it here. I just did it because to me it's just an easy known target I'm trying to hit. So it's very easy for me to identify. And then this is probably people say, well, why don't you use Lambda? Well, I'm kind of old school and I like the old AFR. I really don't like to play with Lambda all that much. I just like the old stuff. But in any case, so what I did for this is, for the supercharger application, I think I've read out there that usually a 12-to-1 ratio is a pretty safe air fuel ratio to run on to give you good performance, but also good longevity for the engine. And again, that's just a very generalized statement. That's not written in stone or anywhere. So for me, what I did was I changed the air fuel ratio for power enrichment and also for my daily driving, or for my for driving outside of power enrichment. So what that means is the vehicle in open loop is running at an air fuel ratio of 12 to 1 all the time. So, for me, when I was looking at my logs, it was just really dead simple to see that, okay, I'm 12 is my target and I'm at 10 something. Just, again, you don't have to do that. You can leave that alone and it be at 14.11 or whatever it is that your ECM is set up. But for me, that's just how I like to do it. Now, that being said, you do want to change, you do want to update your power enrichment ratio, because all these values are going to change back when you're done with this process. But your power enrichment, you're going to want to keep that. Otherwise, you could destroy an engine if it's running too lean. And even if it's running too rich, you can do some damage. So then the last step is just disabling the speed density. We don't want to be using our VVT tables. Or not our VV tables, or VVE tables, of our virtual volumetric efficiency tables. So we want to disable that. And then just like what the note says, when you're all done with your MAF tuning, you want to return these all back to their stock values. And that's pretty simple. That's where having your stock file handy it really comes in play. So it's just as simple as pulling this guy up as a compare file and then going back in there and resetting everything. And again, but keeping your air fuel ratio for power enrichment at the ratio that you want. So that's pretty much it for that. Again, these steps here are probably going to deviate a little bit from what you might find out there. This is just how I do it. You don't have to do it this way, but it's worked great for me and being able to get these things to dial in pretty well. Probably the last thing I'll say, what I'm shooting for when it comes to this guy here is I'd like to try to get that in plus or minus 2. I like to keep it as and even if you're looking over here, I want it to get as close to 12 as I can. So if it's 11.7, 11.8, I can be pretty happy with that as long as it's staying within that threshold throughout all the conditions I'm driving in. And that meaning hilly conditions, flat conditions, hot days, cold days, high humidity, low humidity. As long as it's dialed in pretty close to that 12. In the case that for my target here, then that's great. Okay, guys, so that is, I think, all I wanted to cover for mass airflow. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks.